Like we're probably live broadcasting
on
Kosher Tube. Yep. So I wanted to talk a bit about this time about, since Rosh HaShana is rapidly approaching and we won't be meeting again before the immediate holiday, since our class is on the holidays and we sort of can't do that. I wanted to talk a bit about the original source and some of the concepts behind the holidays that make it stand out a bit from how the rest of the world observes holidays. In general, for instance, we have, let's say, you could say Labor Day, but let's find one that's a little bit more symbolic. Let's say Canada Day. Canada Day is a day that was made in order to remember the day that Canada became a country. We celebrate the day Canada became a country. And 135 years ago, on the 1st of July, Canada became a country. In the United States, in 1776, on the 4th of July, they supposedly signed a paper on that day. It became an independent country. Right? They celebrate that day. Same thing with Yom Ha'atzmaut. Right? These days are days that are remembering a day. Right? So today, nobody would say today, if it was July 1st, that we are like reliving the creation of Canada. We are not reliving it, we're remembering it. It's a big difference. And by our remembering it, because it's an important day, it's a day we don't want to forget, it's a day that our tradition is tied into, and it's a day that therefore is important for us that we remember. However, in Judaism, we really don't have such days like that. We have the idea that a holiday is a reliving, in a spiritual sense, of an event that had a physical action. So, for instance, probably the two most readily simple to understand examples would have to be Passover, Pesach, and Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av. So let's look at Passover. On Passover, we have a Haggadah, we have a Seder, and in it says every person is responsible to feel as if you came out of Egypt. That is to say that on Passover, we who probably really don't know what a slave is today, we have probably most of us have not been to Egypt. We are supposed to, at the Seder, feel like we were slaves in Egypt, which is pretty difficult to do since we don't really understand slavery. We don't really have slavery in that sense in the world, or certainly not in this part of the world, and we were never there. Nevertheless, there's a concept in Judaism that the Almighty puts into the air a spiritual force at different times of the year, and those forces enable us or assist us in accomplishing certain things that at different times of the year we could accomplish, but a little bit more difficulty. So, for instance, at Passover is a time of freedom. That the Almighty put into the air the concept that you can free yourself from whatever is holding you back. That if something is holding you back, right, be it you're a physical slave, you're addicted, you have whatever type of thing it is, there's a boost in the air that you can grab onto during Passover. So you can see it symbolically, Passover being in the northern hemisphere, the spring, when the world becomes free, right? The world itself is frozen, and it's all blah, and suddenly in the springtime it starts to reawaken. So too, spiritually, we have the same idea. So when it says in the Seder that you're supposed to feel like you yourself came out of Egypt and you were a slave, that concept is based on the fact that the freedom from slavery is a spiritual force put into the air that we can grab onto, and we can use that force to help us free ourselves from something that's holding us back. And Tisha B'Av is probably the most obvious example. Tisha B'Av began as the first reference we have to this date, the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av. It happens with the story of the spies in the Torah. In the Torah, it tells us that the Jews decided that they were concerned that the Almighty had promised that they could go to the land of Israel, but they were not. But they were afraid that they weren't prepared. They would go to the land of Israel, and the Canaanites who were living there would fight them, and they could get killed, and they won't be able to inherit the land. Now, why they thought this is hard to understand since the Almighty promised it. But nevertheless, they wanted to go and to spy out the land like any other military army would do before they attack a country. If you're going to go into a country, you want to know what's the country like, what are the people like, what's the culture like, what's the military like, so that you're prepared to go to war. You don't just walk in cold. So they went to the Almighty, and they were at the Moshe, and Moshe went to God, and he said, we want to go into the land to scout it out, so we know what we're getting into. The Almighty didn't want them to do this, but because they wanted to, He allowed it, and He sent them into the land. They came back with horrible stories that the people in the land of Israel are giants, and they're very strong, and the land itself eats its people. In other words, it kills people. It's such a rough land, and they saw what was actually positive things in a very negative light. They had a jaundiced eye, so to speak, to the land of Israel. So when they came back, they were in total desperation. There's no way we're going to win. These people are giants. They're stronger than us. They're better organized than us. We are like grasshoppers compared to them, they say. And then they came back, and they're in such desperation that they knew that they were unable to beat the Canaanites, which God took as a very serious flaw. Because if God says that you can conquer the land, you can conquer the land. And they didn't. And they came back and they told all of the Jews that they were going to have a problem. And the Jews started to cry. And they said, like, what is this? God took us out of Egypt because there's not enough graves in Egypt. We have to die in the desert. So let's forget it. Let's just die now. And the famous line that the Torah says, the line my mother used to say to me all the time, which was, if you're going to cry for nothing, I'm going to give you a reason to cry. And God said the same thing, so to speak. The Medrash says that the Jews cried for nothing. That is to say, they cried, believing they weren't going to be able to get into the land of Israel, when in reality they could get into the land of Israel, and they could conquer it. They believed they couldn't, and they cried. So God said, you're going to cry in this day in the future for a reason. That day was the 9th day of Av. And as history went on that day, the first temple was destroyed on that day. The second temple was destroyed on that day. The city of Beitar was destroyed on that day. The Spanish Inquisition began on that day. We have occasion after occasion, right up until modern times, where on the 9th day of Av, terrible things happen to the Jews. And we say, in Jewish law, that if you have to, let's say, have an operation, or you have to have a court case, and it's not a necessity to have it at a certain time, don't have it then. Not that it will necessarily go bad, but if it could go bad, that's when it will. Because it's a time where Hashem put into the air this power of destruction. Because the Jews caused it with the way they acted, and it became every year it's in the air. It will not force destruction on you. It's not. We don't lose our free will. There's no destiny involved. It's a power. If you latch onto it, it can affect you. It doesn't mean that it can cause you to do something you don't want to do. It's not an extreme, but it's there. So on Passover, it's freedom. On Tisha B'Av, it's negativity. Yes?
In your previous lecture about superstitions,
right?
Very it blurs the line between beliefs and superstitions. You know?
Well, superstition would be where I'm putting
that day is bad.
Right. If that's what that I'm not explaining it well then, because it's not that the day is bad. The actions. See, if we understand how Jews look at time, I should have maybe brought this at first. We understand time a bit different than the world. Let's look at it this way. The world that we live in sees time as a timeline. This is year 0, this is year 10,000. And as we're going through time, we're moving like this, okay? Like a timeline through time. What happened yesterday is gone. What happened tomorrow hasn't happened yet. The only thing that's a reality is the moment we're in. That's how the world looks at time that we're living in. Judaism looks at time differently. Judaism looks at time as a circle. And it looks at circles on top of circles. So you have A moment is a circle, an hour is a circle, a day is a circle, a year is a circle. They're all circles within circles. And by having it, every time we have a year, it goes on top of the other one, and it builds up in a circle. What happens is, when you go around that circle, you end up going to the same spot, but on a different level. Right? So if it's the 15th of December, it's the 15th of December, you're in the same spot. Not like the timeline. Here's the 15th of December last year, here's this year, and it's gone. That's history. With us, we keep going back to the same spot. Therefore, what Hashem does is He puts certain powers of blessing or certain types of powers into the air at certain times. They don't predetermine anything for us. That's why it's different than a superstition. It doesn't mean you will have a bad day or you will have a good day. It means that there is a certain amount of ability for this to be able to be reached. So, for instance, if it's the middle of the winter, I would say you can't go outside for 3 hours without proper clothing. It doesn't mean it's a bad day. It means that there is something about this day called freezing weather, which will affect you if you're not dressed properly. In the summertime, if you're out in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and you go outside without proper clothing, it'll also affect you. While a tepid, go out somewhere where it's 25 degrees all the time, it affects you, but not in extremes. So this is what we're referring to. We're not referring to that it governs you, or if, for instance, if it's the holiday of let's say, the holiday of Shavuos. And the holiday of Shavuos is when we receive the Torah. We don't say we received the Torah once. We believe that every year on that day we receive the Torah spiritually. And how does that affect us? It doesn't affect you, other than if you want to have depth and greater knowledge in Torah, this day it's easier for you to do it than another day. Just like on February 15th, it's easier for you to freeze to death than on July 15th. July 15th is not a bad day, and February 15th is not a bad day. It's just a day that has a certain reality. To us, spiritual reality is a reality. It's not a force on its own. It comes from God. It comes nowhere else. And it's based on our actions. The Jews themselves did something that caused this to be. The Jews came out of Egypt. Freedom was put into the air on that day. We caused the destruction because of the spies. So a power was put into the air on that day. Will that mean that I will have a bad day? No. There are lots of people who have great days on what happens on Tisha B'Av. But if there was something that would happen, that's when it would happen, because history has shown. The first temple was destroyed on that day by the Babylonians. The Romans, totally unrelated to the Babylonians, not the same culture, not the same people, destroyed the second temple on that day. The Spanish started the Spanish Inquisition on that day, absolutely no relationship in 1,000 years between them. It happens to be a day which is not a good day for us, but it isn't a day that is predetermined will be bad. It's only predetermined that it has the ability to be bad. What? Yes?
Some people believe that reality is like things that have happened in the past are like it's not a timeline, like all reality is happening at once. Like some things don't end after they've ended. Like there's right now the Jews are still in Egypt in multiple realities.
I've heard of this. I don't know any proof for it to be real, but the idea of how I come across this concept is that in the secular world, in Canada, we have holidays that we remember because the 1st of July happened. It doesn't happen every year. We don't become a country new every year. We remember we became a country. In Judaism, we say we relive the day because there is a certain taste of the force that happened that day returning every year, but not a force that will cause something to happen, a force that you can use. Right? Just like we know that, for instance, December, I make up the day, December 14th is the shortest day of the year. So you know that if you want to do something in the dark, that's the best day to do it. It doesn't mean that if you do that, you'll be successful. It just means you have more hours of darkness. While the opposite, in July 15th, you have more hours of light. So I've heard this concept you're saying. I don't know if there's any, if it's common belief or if it's scholarly or if there's a basis for it. But it's not what we believe. We understand it that there is no predetermination. We have free will to do what we want, but there are outside things that affect us. And those outside things are attached to time. See, we understand time in a very unique way. We see time as a creation of God. For instance, it says in the story of creation, it was evening, it was morning, the first day, right? The 7 days of creation, it was evening, it was morning, the first day. How could it be evening and morning the first day if there was no sun or moon the first day? There was no such thing. The sun and the moon wasn't created till later. So what is evening? Evening is, and it means, evening means the setting of the sun. So if there's no sun, what is setting? And if it says, and morning means the sun is rising. So there is no sun. There is no moon, there is no sun. So what does it mean in the Torah? So it tells us that the idea is that God didn't create time until he created human beings who could use it. Human beings were created on the 6th day. Which means then when he says it was evening, it was morning the first day, it doesn't mean that it's a day like we have, and it doesn't mean it was 24 hours. It means that there was a beginning and an end to some type of idea that God called a day. Something began, something ended. So that's why, for instance, it is not totally against our belief to say that you found fossils of dinosaurs that you believe are 1 million years old. And yet we say the world is only 5,700 years old. How can they be reconciled? So one of them is that when it says that the world in the first day could have been 24 hours, it could have been 1 million years. We don't know. Because there was no time yet. There was no sun, no moon. So there's no way of having time. So we're not sure exactly how it worked. So in virtue of this concept that time was created when man was created, because man is governed by time. God created time. He governs it. He's outside of time. We're inside of time. Yeah. Right? We're governed by time. That concept is very radically different than how the rest of the world looks at it. Yes?
I thought we believed in divine preordination.
No, we believe only in preordination on a national level. The Jewish people will have the Mashiach. The Jewish people will go out of Egypt. The Jewish people will have the land of Israel, but not on a personal level. Really? Right. There are certain things in your life that the Almighty may say you need to do, but it's based on your free will how you get that done. It could be like this, and you end up in the right spot, or it could be straight to it, all based on your choices. Right? There could be certain things in your life that must happen, and there may not be. But there are definitely certain things for the Jewish people. We see in the book of Esther, Mordecai says to Esther that the Jews are going to be destroyed by Haman. You can save us. But I'm telling you, you can choose not to do it, and God will save us with you or without you. So Esther had the power to save the Jewish people. She could have chosen to not do it. She would have no longer existed after a while, but the Jewish people will exist. So that's what he was saying to her. You can be the one who does it, or you don't have to be. It will happen. It'll either happen directly through you or indirectly some other way. But it's going to happen. Because the fact that the Jewish people were going to survive and continue is destiny. The fact that I, as an individual among the Jewish people, are going to survive is not destiny. That's up to my choices that I make. Right? That's how we see it. Because really, if we believe in true destiny, then we can't believe in free will and reward and punishment. Because if you're destined, no matter what you do, you're going to, not you, Mr. X is going to kill someone, then Mr. X is not responsible for killing that person. He had no choice. It was destined he was going to do it. And therefore, how could you hold him responsible? Because he had no choice but to do it. We say there is no such thing as destiny in such a way. Such a person may be destined to die. We all die. And he even may die in a violent way. But I'm not necessarily the one who's going to do it. There's no particular thing unless I act in a way that causes it. If I become criminal and I start carrying a gun and I start not thinking twice about killing someone for their money, and this fellow happens to be going down the street and I happen to be going the other way, there's a higher propensity of chance that I'll kill him than if I was a simple guy who never picked up a gun in my life. So my choices affect it. But the destiny that I would kill this person, that's not going to happen. We basically believe that the only destiny on an individual basis are with individuals who the world depends on. For instance, like Joseph in the story of the Torah. Joseph had to live. His brothers couldn't kill him. They were planning to kill him, and they ended up selling him down to Egypt. The fact that they didn't kill him was destiny, because Joseph had to live, he had to go down to Egypt, he had to begin the whole process of the Jewish exile into Egypt. That had to be, because Yosef was a person of such stature that, so to speak, the world rested on his shoulders. The average person is not that way. We're all important, we all have important things in our lives and important things we do, but the world doesn't necessarily rest on us, that if we don't do what we're supposed to do, there won't be a world. That's not necessarily the case. We have significance, but not of that size. So therefore, we don't necessarily have a destiny as an individual, but as the Jewish people we do. And therefore, if you follow along with the Jewish people and you stay a part of the Jewish people, you will continue to have that destiny. Just like Esther, when she chose to go see Achashverosh, even though she might die, she chose to put her life with that of the Jewish nation. Right, rather than her choosing to say, I'm not going to go see the king because he'll kill me, he might kill me, I'll just wait and see what happens, the Jews would be saved. But she very well may have died, because she was inconsequential to the Jewish destiny of our freedom. Right? So that's how that works.
But I've heard of the idea, everything comes from Hashem.
It does.
Yes. So how do you reconcile that with free will? If everything comes from Hashem.
That goes back to our original point, that when God created time, it's like any other creation. If I have a child, it's my child. I'm responsible for that child, right? If I create a robot and that robot injures someone or breaks a window, I'm responsible, right? I created it, it's mine. If you create something, you are in charge of it, you govern it. When God created the world, he created time. God governs time. He is not governed by time. We, on the other hand, are a creation of God just like time is, and God created us to be governed by time. Today, you're 50 years old, and 10 years later, you are 60 years old. Time is determining that. You can't say, I'm going to slow down time and not be 60 years old in 10 years. I'll only be 51 years old in 10 years. It doesn't work that way, because time governs us. So if that's the case, so what happens is that as God manipulates things in the world, he sees, for instance, what you're going to do tomorrow, even though you haven't done it yet, and you can choose to do whatever you want. But because he's not in time, he's outside of it. It's sort of like, and if you're close up to a situation, you can only see the immediate situation. If you go back, you can see that, for instance, you're standing in Manhattan and you have to get from 51st Street to 81st Street, and you have no idea if you're walking north or south, if you're going up in the numbers or down in the numbers until you get to the next street sign. You don't know. You're just lost, right? I'm saying that that's the case. You come out of the subway, you don't realize which way you're facing. You walk left. Am I going up in the numbers, or am I going up and go right? I don't know until I get to the street sign, right? If I would say to you, I'm going to put you on top of a building, 200 yards away, and you'll see exactly where everything is, then it's no longer a question to you anymore. God has that distance. He sees all of time and all of space. He knows where you're going to be tomorrow, but he doesn't cause you to go there. So therefore, God has the knowledge, but you have the free will. So that's why predestination doesn't work with individuals, because we have free will. However, God has the power and the authority to do things. He can start something 1,000 years ago, which has 10 million different interactions, that the end result is you end up getting to the corner of this street 3 minutes earlier than me. Right? And he caused people to get married, to move here, to move there, to go all over the place, so that you and I should meet. 1,000 years worth, because he sees everything from far behind. You and I think we're geniuses if we can make 3 things happen. He can do millions of things. So it appears it's totally our free will, but in reality, it's our free will to choose. But it's God puts us in the situation. In other words, the fact that I came out of the subway and I can turn left or I can turn right. I don't know which way is going uptown, but I can go one or the other. My choice is to go left or right. But God's decision is I will get uptown. I'll get uptown immediately if I make the right turn. If I'm going left, I'm going to go uptown right away. Or if I choose to go the wrong way, it's going to take me longer. But either way, I'm going to get there. Right? That's how he does it. So this is this idea is that we have this ability to choose. So I don't see it the same as superstition. I see it as as much of a spiritual force in the air as the physical force of it being cold or being hot or being light or being dark. You can be in dark and get a flashlight. You can be dark and learn to see in the dark. You can be dark and stumble. Or just like a person can go on Tisha B'Av and be unnecessarily put themselves in a situation where things might not go as well as they would on another day. So since we know it, we make a choice to not do those things. So if I have a choice, am I going to have a root canal done on Tisha B'Av or 6 months later? Right, if it's possible to make such a choice, I'll choose to do it 6 months later during the time of Hanukkah, which is a better time in general. But does that mean that if I did it on Tisha B'Av it'll be bad? No, it doesn't mean it'll be bad. It means there's a better chance that it'll be bad. And there's a better chance to be good on Hanukkah. But I know from personal experience that I had someone who I was very close with who was told he needed an operation. He didn't have to have the operation at any special time. He wasn't going to die. His life was improved by having it, but not lengthened. It was just improved by having this operation. So he could have it whenever he wanted. He decided to have it in the month of September. The doctor called him and said, you wait till September, that's 3 or 4 months from now. I can give you this operation tomorrow because somebody canceled on me. But tomorrow was Tisha B'Av. Now, what does he do? So they came to me because the person who spoke to me about this question knew Tisha B'Av, but the person who was getting the operation didn't understand Tisha B'Av. They didn't understand the concept. Right? They had never heard of it. They were Jewish, but they're not part of that. So the person asked me, should I suggest to them not to get the operation because it's Tisha B'Av? So my answer, in my opinion, was that you should not. Because all you're going to do is cause that person to worry that maybe something will happen. Because he's not going to tell his doctor that he's going to move the operation to 3 months later because it's the 9th day of Av, which he doesn't observe. But he's not going to do that. But he will, in the back of his head, be worried. And a person being worried when they go into an operation is more of a problem than Tisha B'Av is. That's more powerful to harm you, your own frame of mind, than Tisha B'Av. Therefore, I told him, don't say anything. He'll have the operation on Tisha B'Av because I don't believe that you can change that. All you can do is change his frame of mind and make it worse. So that's what we're talking about. So when it comes to Rosh HaShana and Yom Kippur, which is important, I want to get to this aspect. What is it? So we say Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of the world. That is to say that the world was created on Rosh Hashanah. Now, if you know the story of creation, you know that can't be, because creation took 7 days, including the Sabbath. So Rosh Hashanah is at best 2 days. In the Torah itself, it's 1 day. It's observed for over 2 days. So if creation was at least 6 days, and Rosh Hashanah is at most 2 days, how can Rosh Hashanah be when the world was created? Because the world took all that time. right? You had one day God separated the light from dark, one day the water from the dry land, one day the sun and the moon, one day the animals, right? So the answer is that Rosh HaShana is the day that human beings were created. The sixth day of creation is Rosh HaShana. If you look at if you go through the history and you map it out on the calendar, you will see that the sixth day of creation is the day of Rosh HaShana. So when we say the world was created in Rosh Hashanah, it means the purpose of the world was created in Rosh Hashanah, which is human beings. Human beings are the purpose of the world was created. We're the only ones with free will. We're the only animal in the world that has the ability of self-determination. We are self-aware. Right? A fish is not really self-aware. It doesn't have free will, but a human being does. A human being has this consciousness. So the world was created for us. That's the day of Rosh Hashanah. So what happens when you are, we're adults, we go to work. When you go to work and you work for somebody for a year, what happens on the day of the first anniversary? Is you have a review. Usually you're supposed to have a yearly review. You go to work for a year, the day 12 months have gone by, you sit down with your employer and he reviews your year. Should I give you a raise? Should I fire you? Are you the same as you were? What can you strengthen? What do you need help with? What do you not need help with? Right? You have a review, a yearly review. For us, Rosh Hashanah is your yearly review. If human beings were created on Rosh Hashanah, and we're human beings, then we have to sort of justify our reality by showing what positive purpose we are in the world on Rosh Hashanah. Right? Just like you have to show your boss what positive purpose it is for you to be in his employment on the day of your anniversary. So Rosh Hashanah, being the day that human beings were created, is the day that there's a judgment where God judges us. He judges us with true knowledge because he doesn't have to listen to us. We don't have to give testimony. He knows what's going on inside of us. He knows what we're really thinking. He knows what we're really doing, right? And therefore, on Rosh Hashanah we have that judgment. And that's because that's when we were created. Now along comes Yom Kippur a week later. And it's an odd thing, because you'd think that, what is Yom Kippur? It's a day of cleanse. We're cleansed of our sins. Well, wouldn't you want to have the days to be cleansed of your sins before your judgment? Like, go in, you get arrested for stealing. So you go into the court a week before your trial and you say, you know what? I did it, and I want to pay him back. And you pay him back. And a week later is your trial. What are they going to do to you? You paid the guy back, you admitted it, you regretted it, so yeah, you did it, so they have to convict you. But are they going to throw the book at you? Probably not, because you've already sort of cleansed yourself of the wrongdoing, and now is your judgment. But we have the judgment, and then we have the cleansing. First is Rosh Hashanah, then is Yom Kippur. So how is that, and what is Yom Kippur? So Yom Kippur also has a similar idea. Yom Kippur is the day it is, because when Moshe came down from Mount Sinai, he went up for 40 days. He went up on for Shavuos, comes down, and he comes down after 40 days, and he sees the Jews are worshiping a golden cow. They're worshiping an idol. That day that he worshiped the idol, right, is the 17th day of the month of Tammuz. Right? It says that from that day onwards through the summer, the Jews repented for what they did. Come Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day of the month of Elul, the month we're in now, God says to Moshe, the Jews will have atoned for what they did, go back up the mountain again for 40 days, and while you're up the mountain, you will write a new set of 10 commandments, because he broke the first set when he came down. You'll get another set, you'll come back down, and the Jews will be forgiven for what they did. The first day of the month of Elul, he went back up the mountain for 40 days. Count 40 days, and you end up in the 10th day of Tishrei, that's Yom Kippur. The day he came back with the 10 commandments, the day the Jews were forgiven, was Yom Kippur. So we now see that based on biblical times, the day of Yom Kippur is a day of forgiveness. It's a day where if you work at it and you strive to become a better person, there's a power you can grab of forgiveness. Can you be forgiven the day before? Can you be forgiven 6 months later? Yeah, you can be. You can atone, you can repent, and be forgiven for most sins anytime you do it. But on Yom Kippur, it's a little easier. There's a little extra push. that's in the air. So therefore, Yom Kippur is the day of the cleanliness. So why does it come after the judgment? Because if it's true, if you're in court, you go to a Canadian court and they arrest you for some type of criminal thing, you want to show them that you have regret and you have done an atonement before you go to court, so they'll judge you in a nicer way. But God already knows how you feel and what you're going to do. He knows that you regret it or you don't regret it. He knows if it's a real regret or not a real regret. He knows if you want to atone for what you've done wrong or you're just afraid of punishment. He already knows this. He knows this because he reads inside of you. He knows the truth. It's not that he knows it before you know it. He knows it because he knows what you're really thinking. You can't trick him. And therefore, when you're judged on Rosh Hashanah, you're judged already with the knowledge that you are going to, hopefully, try to atone. So he already judges it as if you did atone. So that's why on Rosh Hashanah, right, you don't see people just dying. You don't see that happening, right? Someone might die in Rosh Hashanah, but you don't see that everyone has this negative judgment, because it's understood that there's a Yom Kippur coming, and the atonement process has already begun before Rosh Hashanah. So that when Yom Kippur comes, we go through this final thing. The way we understand it is that in Rosh Hashanah, the judgment that we get is a judgment where there is no final word. In other words, you can go to court, three things can happen in court. You can be found guilty, you can be found innocent, or you can have a hung jury. Now, usually in the civil world, a hung jury means that the same thing as being innocent, because they can't try you again. But in the world of God, in the true world, you can be found guilty, that is to say you did this and you are not repenting, or you're innocent, you either didn't do it, or you did it and you repented, or you have a hung jury, which is what 99% of the world of us has, where we're judged like this and it's even. Now God says you have a week. From the day Rosh Hashanah ends, you have a week until Yom Kippur to show that your intent is to improve. So during that week, we work towards that, so that at Yom Kippur we're atoned, and we're supposed to feel that when Yom Kippur ends, that we have been forgiven, and we will have another year. That's not to say you can't die during the year. Everybody has their time. And if you die during the year, it doesn't mean you're evil. It means your time came. Yeah.
Yeah, I bought the Art Scrolls, the entire volume, and there's 10 days.
Right.
But there's only 7 days this year.
Well, first there's what you call the 10 days of tshuva, right? With, you say slichos on but if you read it, there's never really is 10 days of tshuva, because day 1 is Rosh Hashanah, day 2 is Rosh Hashanah, day 10 is Yom Kippur. So you have a week in between where you say slichas, but you also have slichas is said before Rosh Hashanah also, starting this Saturday night. We have a get-together here at Saturday night. You begin it in the middle of the night, like 1 o'clock in the morning. You say slichas the first time, and then after that, until Rosh Hashanah, you say it every morning. So you said Saturday night, so you won't say it Sunday morning. But Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you'll say it in the morning. Then you have Rosh Hashanah Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Friday. Then comes Shabbos. Sunday again, you say slichas for this 10 days of tshuva. You're now in the third day, Sunday.
So I really read the first 7 days.
Well, there's different things. The 10 days of tshuva only has 7 days of it, because at the most, because Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur count as 3 of the 10 days.
Oh.
And you don't say, on Yom Kippur you happen to say slichas, but on Rosh Hashanah you don't. Rosh Hashanah is a day of judgment. It's not a day of repentance. It's a different feel. We're supposed to go into Rosh Hashanah with the belief that we'll be forgiven and that we will be judged favorably. Right? That's the way we're supposed to. That's why, like, when a person is going to go to court, they would, they'll say to a guy, if you're going to go to court for murder, just do yourself a favor and don't get any magazine subscriptions before you go to court. Right? When we go to court, we would say, you know what? It's probably not the best week to buy a new suit, because you might not be around to wear it. It might not be the best week to get your hair cut, because you may not need a haircut in a couple of days. You might be dead, right? But we say, before Rosh Hashanah, you should get a new suit. and you should wear new clothes, and you should get a haircut, and you should look nice, because you have a belief that God will forgive you and will give you another year. That's how we walk in. We don't walk in cocky and arrogant. We walk in with the belief that God wants us to live. He does not want to punish us. He wants us to learn from our mistakes. If we walk into Rosh Hashanah correctly, we walk in with the belief that we are learning from our mistakes, and we will be better people, and we will be judged favorably. And that's why on Rosh Hashanah we don't say slichas. We don't have this concept of repentance on Rosh Hashanah. We have the idea that we will be victorious. We will come out cleansed. And at worst, we come out that we need to go through that week and go to Yom Kippur. But no one is supposed to believe that they actually were judged negatively. You're not supposed to believe that because of the effort you put in, right? We don't walk into Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur without preparation. We've had the month of Elul to try to improve ourselves, to do things better, and then we have after Rosh Hashanah till Yom Kippur a very intense week of trying to improve ourselves to be better people, so that come Yom Kippur, even if we can't sustain the level that we've done, we still will believe will be favorable. So, for instance, like between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it says that there are certain rules that you should do, even though you don't normally do them. For instance, the example the Talmud says is that you have a mitzvah to eat kosher food. That includes kosher bread. Kosher bread does not have to be made by a Jew to be kosher. Kosher is a fact. It's either kosher or not kosher. If it's made by a non-Jew, right, and let's say under a Jew supervision, it's still kosher. However, there's another rule that talks about bread made by a Jew is preferable than bread not made by a Jew. It's preferable. It's not required. So it says that between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you should take stringencies like eating only Jewish-made bread, even if it's harder to get, even if you only do it for that week, and as soon as Yom Kippur is over, you'll stop. So you say, well, how hypocritical is that? I'm going to God and saying, you see how religious I am and how strict I am? I'm eating only Jewish bread, even though I don't have to, because I want to show you how serious I am about this. When in reality, I know, and therefore God knows, that the minute Yom Kippur is over, I'm going to go out and buy bread that's not made by a Jewish bakery, even though it's kosher. So how is that any positive? So the point is that we have a concept that when you're starting something new, the foundation of that makes a world of difference. So if you want to start, for instance, a new year, the first few days of the year set the tone for the whole year. Just like the mitzvah of Bikurim. We have this mitzvah we talked about this week in the Torah, where a person has the first fruit from their orchard. You're supposed to take a basket of it and bring it to the temple. So you say, why bring the first fruit? Why don't you bring the best fruit? Bring the best fruit to the temple. Take a basket of the best apples that you grow and bring that to the temple. Why do you take a basket of the first apples? Maybe they're the crummiest ones. Because the answer is because the first ones set the tone for everything else. It's first. Today is the first day that I'm doing business, and I'm giving it to the temple. That is to say, I'm going to do business honestly. I'm going to do business correctly the first day. If I'm going to have a child, I'm going to make the foundation of that child's life as good so that the rest of his life is good. If I'm going to build a house, if I have a flaw on the 5th floor of a house, it's serious, but it's not as serious as having a flaw on the 1st floor, which is the foundation. So the same thing with our year. When we have the year, we start out the year even doing extreme things like eating only Jewish bread, even though I know I won't do it all year. But I'm setting the tone for myself to act in a certain way in the foundation of the year, the beginning. And even if I change in this specific way and don't do it anymore, I've already set a tone that in other ways I'm going to continue to do it. And therefore I'm radically changing how I live at that point. So that really distinguishes between that concept. So now, when we think of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, these are not arbitrary days. These are days that were already destined from the days of the Torah. When the world was created, it was created that human beings would come into existence on the day that we call Rosh Hashanah, and that's the day that we're judged. Right? A week later is Yom Kippur. That's the day that God forgave the Jewish people for the sin of the calf. And therefore, that's the day we ask God to forgive us for whatever it is that we've done on that same day. And that's why those days, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, are always those specific days. That's why we have things like Rosh Hashanah is early this year, Rosh Hashanah is late this year. It's not early or late. In the Jewish calendar, it's always the same day because it's a real day. Something really happened on that day. But it's not the same day in the English calendar, in the secular calendar, because they don't necessarily jive one with another. So this year, Rosh Hashanah, somebody sent me an article. It was 76,000 years from now, Rosh Hashanah will fall out as early as it did this year. Right? How you know it's so early is that the most amazing thing is that the first day of Hanukkah this year is on American Thanksgiving. Talk about right. How many years does Hanukkah, first day of Hanukkah, follow out on the Christian holiday of Christmas? It happens quite often. That's an entire month different, right? The American Thanksgiving is the 24th, 25th, 26th of November, around there, and this is the 25th of December. And yet Hanukkah is falling out as 76,000 years before it'll happen again, where it falls out this early. This is an interesting point. Right? But it's not that it's early. It's the same day. It's just that it's not jiving correctly with the English calendar. It changes all the time. So next year, Hanukkah will be almost an entire month later than it will be this year.
Leap year.
Right.
And we have 2 Adars.
Exactly. So already this year, Passover will be a month later than it was last year. Right. This year's Passover, and after that, Passover, everything else will be approximately a month later than it is this year. This is the earliest. Next year will be one of the later. Not the latest, but one of the laters, right? Because it can be even later. But that's how it falls. So for us, the Jewish calendar is a day of reality. It's not a day. When Israel picked Yom HaTzmaut to be the Day of Independence, it was somewhat arbitrary. They could have picked one of many different days to be the day that they declared this is the day of our independence. Just like the 4th of July or the 1st of July or the 14th of July with Bastille Day. These are days that have a certain amount of arbitrariness and certain amount of based on history. But they weren't required to be that day because they're just remembrance days. With us, we're reliving the day, so therefore they are the same day. Passover is celebrated on the day the Jews came out of Egypt, period. Not on the day that we remember coming out of Egypt. Rosh Hashanah is on the day human beings were created, not a day we remember they were created. It is the day they were created. And every one of our holidays are like that. It makes it radically different than the other holidays by the other cultures because of that idea.